This is my farm.
Don't come out here and tell me what I need.
I need solutions that work and market options that are worth my time.
Small town support that sees the bigger picture.
A global network that empowers us. A co-op that's there for us every day.
Thank you for joining us for our this week's Washington Week in Review. I'm Spencer Chase, joined as always by Agri-Pulse's Phil Brasher, as well as Wisconsin Democrat Ron Kynes, joining us this week to discuss the week that was, agriculturally speaking, in Washington, D.C. And obviously a lot of the news and information from this particular week is going to be focused on what we learned yesterday in a pair of hearings where U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer made some comments on the Trump administration's trade policies, as well as some comments from a former Trump administration official in regards to the U.S.-China trade deal. And so with all of the things that we discussed or that were discussed yesterday in both of those hearings and in the book excerpts that we saw from former National Security official John Bolton, Representative Kynes, as you look at this in the context of agricultural trade, agricultural exports, for you, what did you learn yesterday?
Well, basically, Spencer, Phil, great to be with you, but we have a lot of work to do. And I give Ambassador Lighthizer a lot of credit. He's done a lot of outreach. He's been very accessible to all of us as we're trying to get a good proactive trade agenda back on the rails again, because it's going to be vitally important for our family farmers here in America that we open up these export markets and clear the excess surplus, which is depressing prices and forcing so many of them into bankruptcy and out of family farming. And part of that tool that we have available is a robust trade agenda. So we need to continue working with the administration to lift the constraints, open up the markets so our farmers get a good price.
Right. What do you make of John Bolton's comments? And obviously, Bob Lighthizer pushed back hard on that when it came up over in the Senate in the afternoon. There were nearly 200 groups and agribusinesses that sent up a letter on Tuesday, right before your hearing, talking about the importance of this agreement. It's phase one agreement, how critical it is for so many sectors. Is that going to happen? And does this flap with Bolton have any impact on?
Well, you know, Phil, I've always been critical of the president's use of 232 and 301 authority because it only invites retaliation, tit-for-tat trade wars. And it's typically our family farmers who suffer the most and manufacturers, not to mention the increased cost to American consumers with the additional tariffs that they have to pay. But my first thought when I heard of the report of John Bolton's accusation is, I hope to hell it's not true. Having just gone through the whole Ukraine impeachment process, if he hasn't learned that it is completely inappropriate for a sitting president to be applying any type of pressure or asking any favors of a foreign government to interfere in our election process, I don't know what's going on. That is an impeachable offense in my mind. And it's so beyond the bounds of decency and normal protocol for any president, let alone this one. So this has to be looked into, I think, much greater. Obviously, you've got blanket denials flying out there right now, but apparently former National Security Advisor John Bolton has some pretty damning evidence there that needs to be further explored.
Well, how confident are you that the commitments that China made under this deal are actually going to be carried out?
Well, we hope they will, but listen, I'm skeptical. I know a lot of other people are skeptical just because of the economic hit that China's facing right now and the lack of disposable income that they have, and also trying to get the private sector to do these purchases, which is going to be difficult. But the goal is to try to get China back at least to where they were pre-trade war in the purchase of our products again. And they have, pivoted to other markets, Brazil, Argentina, obviously to supplant lost commodities that they normally purchase from us. It's tough for them to pivot away from those. And the longer this continues, the harder it is to recapture those lost markets. Any economist will tell you that. And I think that's the great concern I hear from my family farmers here in Wisconsin is we've got to find a landing zone, do it quickly, or we're going to be behind the eight ball for a long time to come.
Look ahead just a little bit. You mentioned that you've been critical of the way the tariff authority has been used. But how as a Democrat, how would a Democratic administration, how can you assure voters that a Democratic administration would be more successful with China than Trump has been? I know there's been a lot of talk about involving our allies more, but we've had issues with them in vis-a-vis China with 5G, Huawei, and so forth. How do we know we can do it without tariffs and get the concessions, get the issues like the IP and other trade barriers?
Yeah, Phil, that's a great question. You know, I haven't been critical of the goals of the administration, the structural reforms that need to take place in China. I have been very critical about the tactics and the strategy being used here, which again invites a tit-for-tat trade war, hurts our farmers, hurts our manufacturers, and it doesn't accomplish the objectives at the end of the day. I'm still very critical of this administration and, quite frankly, Secretary Clinton turning her back on the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. Those structural reforms were embedded in that agreement, fully enforceable. At some point, China wanted in, and they would have had to live up to those high standards and those structural reforms that are required to be a member of that agreement. And instead, the Trump administration immediately rejected it from day one. And another route that we can take too is by working within the World Trade Organization through plurilateral agreements to implement these structural reforms that China will be hard to ignore. And that means building up friends and alliances again that have been badly damaged. And I think ultimately that's the best way to confront China, not alone, but with a coalition of like-minded nations establishing high rules of global trade that we are expecting China to adhere to, or there will be a global response to that, not just from one U.S. administration.
Now, Congressman, I'll kind of level with you as a lifelong Green Bay Packers fan. I've always been very, very interested in the state of affairs in the broader Wisconsin area. So I've always kept a keen eye on your state, and I'm not the only one these days. A lot of folks running for president are very interested in the thoughts of the people of Wisconsin. And so with kind of that in mind, and in that context, what are you hearing from your constituents as they consider how they plan to mark their ballots come November? And if you were advising a candidate looking to win the support of Wisconsinites and rural residents of your state, what is that counsel? What does someone need to do to win over those voters?
Yeah, Spencer, just a couple of weeks ago, I did a virtual roundtable with Vice President Joe Biden here in Wisconsin. It was about a rural economic opportunity agenda. And for an hour and a half, Joe Biden went deep on the issues, connecting the dots, very articulate, and very thoughtful and visionary in what he's offering to how do we revitalize rural America, not just with agriculture, but with healthcare and broadband, the digital divide, and economic opportunities that have to take place as well. And he's laying out that agenda right now. But first and foremost on people's minds, who's going to keep us safe and healthy in the midst of this global pandemic? Who has the leadership in order to develop a national strategy to defeat the virus, keep people healthy while opening up this economy again, rather than throwing caution to the wind? If you can at least assure people that you are first and foremost concerned about their life and their health, it's hard to have a conversation with them beyond much of that. But even beyond that, I know Joe Biden's talking about how do we rebuild America again coming out of this virus, rather than just going back to a status quo that's been leaving too many people behind, and the economic, the educational inequities that have developed in our economy. So, the crisis can also present opportunities. That's what this campaign should be about for those running for president. What is your vision of tomorrow? How do we survive this pandemic and ensure it doesn't hit us again in the future? And how do we rebuild America so that we are competitive, innovative, creative? That's also how we beat China, is by investing in these basic things to empower the American worker so they can be full participants of the global economy, and that we're just better than China at what we do.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, a lot of people are going to pay a lot closer attention to Wisconsin in this upcoming presidential election, given that it did go from blue to red in the 2016 race. But do you think that Vice President Biden's message has a chance to crack through? I mean, do you think he can find a receptive audience in not only in Wisconsin but in rural Wisconsin?
Yeah, I think so. And obviously, the president's agenda has not been a pro-farmer agenda at all. We've had record bankruptcies now the last 3 years here in Wisconsin for family farmers, and they're still wondering what the game plan is, where the end is to all of this. And he hasn't been very reassuring to them when it comes, especially to trade policy, knowing how important that is to Americans' agriculture. But even beyond that, 2020 is different from 2016. That was very much a binary choice in 2016 between kind of this new guy outsider who knew how to market himself versus an established 30-year entity where it was really difficult for a lot of folks to pull the lever for Hillary Clinton. I think Joe Biden is very reassuring given his history, his experience, the compassion that he brings to this campaign. I mean, Joe Biden's a guy who's been knocked down in his personal life, loss of his wife and daughters, loss of his son, Bo. A lot of people feel they know him throughout the years, but most importantly, I think Joe Biden knows us and the challenges and the struggles that we're going through. And that passion, that compassion really does come through in everything that Joe Biden does. I think that's going to be a huge distinguishing factor in this campaign this year.
So obviously a lot of things going on that are critical to Wisconsin, critical to farm policy, critical really to the agricultural systems of the United States. And obviously, Representative Kind, we appreciate you taking a little bit of time to discuss those with us here today.
Yeah, happy to do it, guys. Stay well.
For Phil Brasher and Congressman Ron Kind, I'm Spencer Chase. Have a good one.